Hey everyone, it's Emily Fox. Today's video is going to be a new reading vlog where I attempt to read books that were shown in popular TV shows or movies. If you have anything you would like to see, let me know in the comment section. Recently, I did one about Rory Gilmore's reading list from Gilmore Girls. It was a lot of fun. I found some new favorites, so I thought it would be fun to do one about Kat's reading list from 10 Things I Hate About You. So I rewatched the movie in preparation, hard work, and I made a list. I remember her reading more than she did, but I think she just mentioned some authors at a few spots, so it makes it seem like she reads a lot more. But I do own already a couple of them, so I thought it would be fun to still attempt this challenge. So the first one that we are shown in the movie is The Bell Jar, which I do own. It's been on my shelf for a really long time. And I remember actually reading it, and let's see. Page 25. I apparently started it. Sometimes I do that. I try a book, and when I'm not feeling it for whatever reason, or I try a couple ones, and it was just not the one I decided to pick. And I don't remember if there was a reason or not. I'm actually curious about that. But this is such a popular novel. It's been on my TBR for years. I've been wanting to read it. I had seen this specific quote about the fig tree, and it just really, really spoke to me. And I have heard amazing things, although I have been told that not everything is aged well, so I will be prepared for it. But I'm really curious. It's not even a big book. It's like 200 something pages, 230. So I can definitely read that this week and figure out if our tastes are similar or not. We'll see. That's the first one. Then she does list a couple authors, like I was mentioning during English class. They're reading Shakespeare, but she's not the one choosing that book, so I didn't include that one. But she mentions that she wishes they could read something else, like Sylvia Plath, which she's shown reading later, and then Charlotte Bronte, which we'll talk about in a second. And she mentioned Simone de Beauvoir, which I've never read anything by her. Is it worth it or not? Let me know. I know The Second Sex. That's the one I've known the most, I've heard the most about, but I have yet to read anything by her, so would love to hear your thoughts. And then later, you see her reading this book, which was really hard to figure out. I ended up having to Google it because you can't see anything. This is a combined edition of one book per Bronte sister, and luckily, I have read all three, so I can review them right now for you. The first book in there is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, which is the author she mentions in English class. This book is the most popular, I'm pretty sure, out of the three, and I did enjoy it. I enjoyed Jane as a character. I enjoyed the first half, I should say, of the book. The writing is beautiful. I enjoyed it. I thought that Jane as a character was quite progressive for the time, and I enjoyed watching her character's growth again for the first half, and then the romance happens. Which I never understand why people like Mr. Rochester. Like, it makes me question my sanity and then question yours, because why? And like, people always say, like, who thinks this is romantic? A lot of people. Actually, you know what? Let me include some screenshot of my comment section on Goodreads. I will go ahead and delete those comments before I post this video, because I don't want anyone to go bully anyone. But like, people genuinely like him and think he's hot or whatever, which, are you okay? Did you forget what happens? And then the ending? I can always spoil everything, comment section, by the way. But yeah, I just wasn't a fan of this whole section of the book, and I was a little disappointed with the ending. But overall, I do understand why this book is so popular. The second one is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. And this one, I've also heard people say it's a romance, and that is even worse. But this book is a really good example of a gothic novel, if that's something you enjoy. You know, the vibes, they're definitely there. It's definitely dark. The characters are just a bunch of awful people doing awful things to each other. So again, romance would be questionable, but I did overall enjoy that one also. And then the last one is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte, and that's my favorite one, which it's super underrated. I feel like it deserves so much more hype. This book was so progressive that at the time, whenever the author passed away, her other sister decided to not get it republished because of the backlash. I feel like that makes me want to read it even more, and it was definitely worth checking out. The story following this man who decides that he's in love with this new woman in the neighborhood who is a tenant at Wildfell Hall. But she lives there alone with her kid, which is very suspicious at the time, and you get her backstory through the novel. I really enjoyed it. I loved the writing. The ending, from, again, a 2024 lens, not my favorite, but I understand why. It was the right choice at the time. But this book absolutely is worth checking out. Would absolutely recommend that one too. The last book you're seeing in the movie is The Feminine Mystique. It's actually in the bookstore whenever Patrick and Kat are arguing. He's telling her, oh, I'm there to pick up that book. So she picks it up for him, and then you see it on the screen. I'm assuming he picked it up from her reading list that her sister gave him to try to, you know, figure out what her taste is like. I wish there was a picture of that actual reading list. I would have had more books to pick it from, but I do own this book, so let's go grab it. Might as well just pick it up. This is my nonfiction shelf, and here it is. So let me just grab it. So this book came out in the 60s and was apparently quite revolutionary. It is a nonfiction about the boredom of these specific women. It's probably the most common critique I've heard of it, that there's literally no intersectionality. So it's following white women, specifically university educated ones who had degrees and then were pushed very strongly into becoming stay-at-home moms, and they're just very bored and they don't understand why they're not being fulfilled, since everywhere, you know, on TV, in ads, they're shown that this is, you know, this should be fulfilling in their dream life, and they're just not feeling that. And it was very taboo to admit. So this book, whenever it came out, changed everyone's life. My edition is from 2013, so I am curious to see how they will address it in the introduction. They often do that, and we'll see how bad it is. I might still find this super interesting. I do like to compare how like older feminist works compared to more recent ones, but this was very popular at the time, so I think it would be interesting to check it out. I don't know if she would read something else if she were in 2024. I don't remember when the movie was published. Let me check. The movie did come out in 1999, so I feel like that would play into her reading taste. I feel like if she were to be a 2024 girly, she would probably pick up... Actually, you know what? Let me show you my bookshelves. Let me show you what I think she should read. We're going to go back in the nonfiction section, because there's definitely one or two books that I think she would absolutely read. Actually, this one would be really good. If you like medical kind of history of misogyny, this is the best one I have read. I've read a ton. This was the best one. I did also enjoy... Where is it? Oh, Invisible Women. This one is also super interesting. It's about, like it says on the cover, the bias in research, for example, but also just in general. It's incredibly frustrating, but very interesting. I think she would love this one too. I know the title is very eye-catching, but it talks about incels, pickup artists, and the author does mention some possible solutions towards the end, but it was super good, but again, quite enraging. I feel like in general, she would like all my feminist books. I feel like she should read probably some more intersectional ones. Oh, and title is also really good. She probably should pick this one up, to be honest. On that note, I will go ahead and pick up these books. I'm really curious to see if there was a reason that I put it down or not, because I call these books usually part of my pile of shame, which there's no shame there. It's just a funny way of calling it. But this has been on my pile of shame for at least 3 years, if not 5. So that's my TBR for the week. Let's see how it goes and if Kat and I have similar taste or not. So we are halfway through the week, and I thought it was time for me to update you. And I am only like 20 pages into the nonfiction. We'll talk about that in a second, but let's talk about this one because I made it to chapter 7. So I am not nearly as far into it as I thought I would be. I thought I would read this in like 2-3 days and then be able to focus on nonfiction and read as much as possible of that one so I could have a review. And I'm struggling because I hate this. I thought Kat and I would have similar tastes in books than I do, but I think her English teacher calling her out, he was right, because if that's how she feels about life. Okay, but seriously, I don't know what people see in this book, and I keep telling myself one more chapter in the hope that I will finally get it, and I don't know if these things are on purpose or not. For example, the main female character is absolutely insufferable, and I don't usually mind unlikable characters, but she's really bad, and I don't know if it's on purpose yet. I purposely did not look it up. I really want to try to make my own opinion first before I, get influenced by everyone else, and I don't know yet. I'm on at chapter 7, so I'm going to push through, and if I feel like giving up, I'll look it up to see if it makes me want to finish it. But she's awful. The very female character goes to New York to she gets an opportunity basically to get a free experience to go study and work, blah, blah. And she's an awful friend. Like, she literally leaves her friend basically in her vomit at her door because she doesn't want to deal with it. She gets sick in a taxi and, again, just doesn't want to deal with it. She just runs away when she quickly paid. She just all around is extremely unlikable, which again is not necessarily a deal breaker, but I don't really care for the story so far, not that I'm that far into it, and I don't care for the writing, and people were like being way too nice about how racist this is. In the first 2 chapters, there are 3 instances where specifically a white woman is compared negatively to a person of color, and 2 out of 3 of those, they're using a slur. So I'm going to read the other one because that one doesn't contain one, but it's clear. Let me just say it. So page 17 in my edition. I noticed a big, smudgy-eyed Chinese woman staring idiotically into my face. It was only me, of course. I was appalled to see how wrinkled and used up I looked. I don't think I need to say anything. I don't. I really like. Yeah, maybe she is meant to be depressed and going through it, whatever. But I'm still waiting for that moment that I would be like, oh, this is why people like it. I don't get it so far. So that's not going well. But again, I'll give it a few more days since I have the time, but it's not looking good. So as far as the nonfiction, I'm only at page 20, like I was saying, although the intro wasn't numbered, so like I read a bit more than that. I usually try to force myself, that's not the right word. I usually attempt to read like 5 to 10 pages at least a day when I read nonfiction. Sometimes I'll read a ton more and sometimes I'm just not feeling it. And I feel like when the two books you're reading are not going well, it tends to be shorter. Anyway, I have a few comments. So I was mentioning in the intro how I expected the introduction of this book to mention the fact that, it lacked intersectionality, and it does, but in a way that really did not sit well with me. First off, that's not about that. It does mention that this book, it would probably be on the most important book of the 20th century if it existed. So I do want to read something that was life-changing for a lot of people or important history. But the portion it's page 12 of the intro, so it's not again numbered, but I'm going to read it. You can make your own judgment. It says, critiques and many fans feel obliged to point out that the things that the feminine mystique ignores, and they are right to be a bit flummoxed that although Friedan was writing during the civil rights movements, barely mentions African American women. What do you mean feel obliged? I feel like, I don't know, that word didn't really sit well with me, but now I'm definitely prepared for it to be specifically privileged white women, which again, I feel like that's what the teacher, Kat's teacher, was mentioning when he called her out about being privileged white women, which, I mean, he wasn't wrong. He wasn't wrong. But now, as far as the actual topic of the book, basically they summarize it by that question of these women waking up one day and just thinking, is that all? Is there nothing else for me, for my life, than just being a stay-at-home mom after, studying? That's it for me? I also thought it was interesting that apparently at the end of the 1950s, the average marriage age for women in America was 20 years old. And I feel like I am not the same person I was when I was 20. Like, I can't imagine having to choose someone to marry at that time. I would have chosen wrong. But I'm still interested in trying the book because I think that this feels extremely still relevant nowadays with everything that's happening, because there's a male humorist that made a joke in 1960 that the problem of all these women not knowing, being unsatisfied with life could be solved by taking away women's rights to vote. And I feel that, again, this feels extremely relevant with the right-wing movement that is happening all over the planet. So I know that what's been going on in the US, of course, I'm in Canada, it's happening too. So yeah, I don't think it's funny to joke about politics being too much for women. So I'm going to keep reading them in the hopes that it gets better. I don't expect them now to become favorites, and Kat and me might not have the exact same taste, clearly, but I still think I can get something out of this, or at least I will satisfy my curiosity, because again, both of them were books that were on my shelf for a while that I wanted to get to. So at least that will be the one positive, but we'll see. We'll see. Okay, the lighting is really bad, but I just need to talk about the book because I'm about halfway through and oh my gosh. The chapter right after I was about to put it down last update, things got a bit more interesting in the sense that you finally get the quote with the fig tree, and there's a few interesting bits that we'll talk about in a second, but I am once again very much considering putting it down because chapter 10, the first sentence, the face in the mirror looked like a sick Indian. So she is once again describing herself negatively, comparing herself to a person of color. Like, it's relentless. Like, it keeps happening over and over again. And, like, at this point, it's pretty obvious she is not well and she is not a good person, but, like, it's just so relentless. I can't deal with it. I'm gonna put you there so I can actually look at my quotes. Um, she mentioned how she was only purely happy before she was 9, and it's alluded that her father passed away, so I'm assuming that she's probably depressed. Again, it doesn't justify any of the rest, but you know. Oh, that was a good part. She realizes that other people are basically better than her. Like, she's always been very focused on having A's in school and everything. And she's saying how the trouble was I had been inadequate all along. I simply hadn't thought about it. So I thought that was an interesting quote. And then there's the whole fig tree thing, which I'll put on the screen, which I relate to, but like, oh my gosh. Oh, another racist comment. Fun times. Like, how do you guys continue reading this? Like, it's just pissing me off. I'm gonna put this one on the screen too because I thought that was more impactful. Basically, she sees her potential life being married as like dreary and wasted life for a girl with 15 years of straight A's. And then that whole sentence paragraph is interesting. How, in spite of all the roses and kisses and restaurant dinners that men showered on the woman before he married her, what he secretly wanted when the wedding service ended was for her to flatten out herself as a kitchen mat. So I would want to be in your shoes in the 60s. I feel like that is one thing that I am personally very grateful for, having the choice to be independent and just hoard cats instead. Are two good quotes worth pushing through all of the racist stuff? Not really. Not really. Um yeah, I am very, very close to just giving up on this book, but I'm gonna give it one more shot. This last update is going to be done in my PJs because frankly, I did not have a good time this week. This was a complete fail. I even hesitated finishing the vlog and just scraping it and not posting it, but I think this is more realistic. Not everything I will read will be amazing. I will not agree with every character in a movie or anyone that makes a list of favorite books that I try to read. So we're just gonna be honest. I will include a third book in here because I listened to an audiobook and it was good, and I do feel like Kat should be reading it. So let's talk about The Bell Jar. I did not finish it. I did read further than I don't remember where I was at. It's been a whole week since I started reading this. I haven't tried to finish a book this hard since like The Guest List, which I've been joking for years that I tried it 7 times. And I mean, the whole week I would put it down, tell myself one more chapter. It's been awful. And I made it to 152. It's like, what, 80 more pages? And I can't do it. It's so silly. It's so few pages, but I literally cannot do it. So where was that? I'm assuming she was still in New York under that scholarship, and she was being the B word to everyone, including herself, frankly. And none of that stuff stopped, really. She kept being racist. She literally went through the whole globe of like insulting every race she could think of. And yeah, she's definitely going through things. You can definitely see her falling into deep depression whenever she goes back home. Not that it justifies any of that. See, this one was Aztecs. Like, why would so I think that's basically where I was at. She was about to leave New York. I didn't know that. But then oh, see, another one. This one is Indian. So yeah, she's not very likable. Let's just go with that one. And yeah, I ended up basically putting it down at the end because she's going through electroshock treatment. And like, is that why people like this book? Because it's a good representation of someone being depressed? Is that what it is? Because I do not understand it. Yeah, there were a few good quotes, but I don't feel like it compensated enough for me to enjoy it. And of course, I'm looking at it through modern lens, blah, blah. Yes, yes, I can't help it. And I feel like sometimes there are books that I will still enjoy even though, but I will make sure to mention the even though portion. But I liked nothing except those 2 quotes. That's it. I don't understand. If you enjoyed this book, please let us know why. I don't mean this like rudely or anything. I'm genuinely curious what people liked about it. Again, my expectation is that people will say it's because of the accurate representation of depression, maybe. But I don't get it. I don't even want to talk about this book anymore. Like, I genuinely hated it. So let's talk about the other book I was meant to read this week, which is the Feminine Mystique, the book that apparently changed everything. And I made it 2 chapters in. To be fair, 2 chapters is like 66 pages. So I made it to, chapter 3. I I think the timing, both of these books, but mostly this one, was probably not the greatest with everything that's been going on in the last week. And reading about the mirage, the perfect housewife, which is the beginning, right? I'm sure eventually it gets into more of a social commentary, but the beginning, it's painful to read because, the whole pushback of trying to, especially in social media. But it was a difficult read because 66 pages to say. Chapter 1 was, like I said, the problem with no names, basically women being bored at home after going to university, shocking. And then chapter 2 was talking about how the portrayal of this perfect housewife in media, the social media, that's nowadays. Basically, the people behind it were men. Like men coming back from the war and wanting that comfort and like pushing back women, trying to convince them that no, quit your job, quit university, just become a mom. So 2 chapters just for that. Again, from a modern lens was a lot. Again, I'm hoping that afterwards it's going to get better. So yeah, clearly, again, don't have a great opinion of this book so far. I am willing to continue. I'm not in a rush though, because I'm going to be honest, there are so many other nonfiction books on my shelf that I'm dying to read that this will probably go in what I call my pile of shame. And eventually I will get back to it and finish it, because I do think that, once again, it's a very interesting portion of history that relates closely to what's going on at the moment. But maybe it's too close to comfort at the moment. I don't know. But one book that I did like, the audiobook, see, we're trying to save the vlog here. I read The Color Purple. I listened to that one as an audiobook, and it was great. I know some of you were worried how I would feel about it as an audiobook since it's written like letters. So at first it's like the main character writing letters to God and then to a sister who moves to Africa for years and years. So you're following them over the whole lives, pretty much sending each other letters. And I found that it was perfect as an audiobook. 4-star. Loved it. Kat should definitely read that book. I feel like that would have been a good book for the teacher to actually give them to read in class. So definitely some trigger warnings. Obviously, it talks about like essays, like children, and there's actually a queer relationship, which I wasn't expecting. So yeah, that saved my week a little bit. Because it was rough. So I think that next week I will be solely focusing on books I'm hoping to give 5-star to, trying to save my month, and we'll end the month with my Read It on Haul It. So in conclusion, do I have the same taste as Kat? No. Although, to be fair to her, I did enjoy the other books that she's mentioned, the ones that I had read. So the Bronte sisters. So like, it's not 100% her fault, but I do feel like she would read this. She would, probably because, once again, she was going through it. So maybe that's what she was doing to herself reading this book. Either way, between Kat and Rory so far, Rory all the way. Obviously, again, she has 400 books to choose from, which helped. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thumbs up, subscribe. I'll put the video about Rory actually on here so you can click it and check it out. And I will see you next video. Bye.